Hey, if you've ever been on a dive and lost any of your dive gear, then you're going to want to pay attention to this video, because in this video, we're going to show you how you can secure all of your dive gear so you never lose any of your equipment on a dive ever again. In this video, we're going to be showing you why it's incredibly important that everything be clipped off onto your dive gear. This is so that you don't lose anything when you're on your dive. Now, equally important is that all of the gear that you have on your rig itself is stowed away and clipped off in a way that it's completely out of the way. It doesn't dangle. It can't get tangled up with any part of the reef, any monofilament, or anything else that's on there. So we're going to be showing you that in this video as well. Then we're going to show you the kind of clips that you should be using on your dive gear. This is something that's often overlooked, but incredibly important. And then finally, at the end of this video, we're going to show you how to actually take the clips and physically tie them onto your gear. One of the reasons why we created this video is because a lot of the people who downloaded our guide, the 8 navigational tools you should never dive without, were asking us how to actually clip their gear off so that they wouldn't lose anything. And we wanted to make sure that if you hadn't already downloaded our guide, that you could do so. So there should be a little eye over here in the corner, and if you click there, you'll be able to download our free guide. So the first thing that we want to talk about when we talk about clipping our dive gear off are these guys right here, the flashlights that I have clipped onto my rig. And you might be wondering why I have flashlights if it's daytime. And there's actually 3 reasons why I take flashlights with me into the water on every single dive, and I think you should too, so I want to mention this first. Now, the first reason why I always have flashlights with me is because by having it on my rig every time, I can never forget it. So it doesn't matter if I'm going out on the boat at daytime or nighttime, I know that I'll never forget my flashlights because it's always on my rig. Now, the second reason is probably the more obvious one, and that's because it's nice to have flashlights. There's times when you might be on a reef and you want to look through a little coral cave, or you might be on a shipwreck and you want to look through a hallway. It's always nice to have a light source to be able to see a little bit better when things get dark. And the third reason why is probably the most important. It deals with navigation. So let's assume for a second that you come up to the surface of the water and you're away from the dive boat, and the dive boat's actually already at a point where they're trying to find you. Now, having a flashlight with you in the water actually can serve as a signaling mirror, because the front of the flashlight actually is a mirror. So you can actually take the sunlight and flash it back to the dive boat if you're on the surface of the water. The other reason is, heaven forbid that day turns to night. Now it's dark, people are still looking for you. This is where it's especially important for you to have a flashlight, because that flashlight will act as a beacon for other boats in the area to be able to find you, and it increases your chances of actually being found if they were to turn to night. Now, with that being said, let's talk about how these things are clipped off. You'll notice that I have a backplate and wing on myself, and that's what I always dive with. But it doesn't matter if you're using any other kind of BCD system. Most BCDs are going to have some kind of a clipping system for you to be able to clip your gear off. What's important is I see a lot of people take their equipment and they actually just clip it anywhere and call it a day. And that's really not enough. And the reason why is, let's say I took this flashlight and I just clipped it off and I left it here. What's going to happen is, when I actually go on my dive, you're going to remember most of your dives are happening where you're in a horizontal position. So if my body goes horizontal, then this flashlight comes forward, and all of a sudden I now have a dangly, which, especially if I start going really low onto the reef or really low on a shipwreck, this basically is going to be beating up the reef. It's going to be something that can get caught up in monofilament line, and you really don't want that. So this is a principle that applies to pretty much everything, but I'm just using the flashlight to illustrate it. Is when you clip something onto your rig, you also want to have a way to pretty much tighten it down. That's why I have a tire inner tube here, which basically keeps it tight on my rig so that when I go horizontal, it's never going to dangle, it's never going to get caught in anything. Now, your equipment's not just going to be clipped onto you. You don't want to have everything all over the place. It's also going to be inside of pockets. So the other thing that's really important is you want to have a way so that whatever you put inside your pocket can be clipped off. And the reason why is this, is when I reach in here and I pick something up from my pocket, everything else that's in there has a potential to pretty much fall out. So you want to make sure that when you reach in your pocket, if you grab whatever it is that you have inside your pocket, that something else comes out, that other piece of equipment that falls out isn't going to get lost. And that's the reason why it's important for everything to be able to be clipped off inside your pocket. So you know that everything that goes inside your pocket should really be clipped off. So let's talk about how you can configure your pocket so that you don't lose anything when you put it inside. Now, what I have in my pocket is a cord, and you can use either a cord or you can use a bungee cord, but the idea is you're going to create a loop that goes inside of your pocket. And then what that does is, that loop is where you're going to take your equipment and then clip it off, so that once it's inside your pocket, if you reach in and you pull out the piece and something else comes out with it, you're not going to lose anything. So you grab the piece that you need, you clip it off, and you put everything else back inside your pocket. Now we've got the three most common types of clips over here on the table, and I want to talk about each one of them and the pros and cons of each. Now, before we start talking about the different kinds of clips, the first thing that I should mention is that these clips should always be made out of stainless steel or brass. In this case, all three of these clips are made out of stainless steel, and the reason why you want them to be stainless steel or brass is because you don't want them to get rusted out when you take them diving in the ocean. Now, the first type of clip I want to talk about is this one right here, which is the bolt snap. It's a really common type of clip. You see this very often in diving situations, and basically when you need to clip it off to your D-ring or anything else, all you do is pull back on this little trigger over here, and you're able to connect it to your D-ring. Now, the good thing is that this is really simple, really easy to use. The bad thing is that over time, this little mechanism, because it's a spring-loaded mechanism, over time this can actually start to become rusted out. So you need to make sure that if you're using a bolt snap, that you always rinse it out and that you from time to time go in and lubricate the little spring in there, the little mechanism, so that you can continue to use it for years to come. The second kind of clip which I can recommend and I like a lot is this one right here, which is the trigger snap. So very similarly, you can pull back over here and connect it to just about any piece of dive gear. The reason why I like trigger snaps is because it tends to not rust out as frequently or as rapidly, I should say, as the bolt snap does. So it's really a matter of preference as to which one you like, but either one of these two are really good choices for your dive gear. Now, the third kind of clip that you often see is this third one over here, which is called the carabiner. Now, I do not like the carabiner, and the reason why is if I bring a string over here, you can see that basically with just a little flick, I can connect it to just about any line in the water. And the problem with this is if you have your flashlight or anything else connected to a carabiner like this, basically if you come across fishing line, monofilament line, just about anything, all it takes is a little clip and bam, you're stuck. And with a lot of technical divers, they actually will call this a suicide clip because they consider this to be a hazard where you can actually become entangled to the wreck or anything else you're diving on if you have your gear affixed with this particular type of clip. So now that you know the different kinds of clips that you can use for your dive gear, let's talk about how you're actually going to attach it. And the first thing that I need to mention is that you want to do it with braided nylon line. This is the kind of line that comes at the end of most reels or spools that are used for scuba diving. And the reason why you want it to be braided nylon line is because if you use any other kind, the twisted, which is what you find at most hardware stores, that kind of line can fray and it can lead to you losing your dive gear. You also don't want to use zip ties, which is something that's pretty common because over time, unless you're really keeping a close eye on it, zip ties over time will dry out, and then without warning one day, because it's dried out, it'll basically break and then you can lose your dive gear. So we really like to use braided nylon line. Now let's talk about how you're actually going to attach the knot. So what you're going to do is, I've already set my trigger snap on my whistle over here together. It's really simple. All you're going to do is you're going to take your knot, you're going to go and do an overhead knot, and then basically what you do is you reverse the direction. So you go in the opposite direction and you're tying a square knot here. And what I like to do is after I tie my square knot, I like to tie two little knots over here at the very end. And this is just to make sure that it doesn't slip off at any point. So I'll tie one knot over here and then I'll tie the other knot. And once these two knots are tied together, all that you have to do is get a pair of scissors, cut all the excess line off. So I'm going to cut over here, I'm going to cut over here. And once those two are cut off, then what I like to do is I'll take a lighter and I'll burn the very end of these two knots. And what that does is it makes sure that it'll never fray, it'll never go anywhere, and it's completely secure. So now you know how to clip off your gear so that it never gets lost when you go on a dive. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that we have a free guide that's called the 8 Navigational Tools That You Should Never Dive Without. If you click on the little eye over here, you can download our free guide. And also, if you found this video useful, make sure you subscribe to our channel, leave a comment below, give us a thumbs up. I hope you really found this video useful, and thank you for watching.